soon, in the next few minutes. He's been under growing international pressure to authorise the delivery of heavy German-made tanks to Ukraine to help Kyiv with its war effort. We can hear now from a Ukrainian Member of Parliament who was at the meeting in Davos yesterday.
And I hope tomorrow Chancellor Scholz, during his address on the World Economic Forum, will announce that Germany finally supports the delivery of Leopard tanks to Ukraine and will take active part in this for us to receive a really needed number of tanks to change the situation on the ground.
Well, we're expecting to hear from Olaf Scholz in the next few minutes, and Chief Political Correspondent Nina Haase is here to talk us through that and talk us through the issues. Welcome back, Nina. So we're expecting to hear from Scholz that, he might have changed his mind, he's changed his mind a little bit, he's thinking about maybe changing his mind. What are we expecting?
No, Olaf Scholz is not somebody who will inform you about anything that he's currently thinking about but hasn't decided yet. That is not how he works. He works very hard behind the scenes. That is his style. And then he'll come out with an announcement once it's crystal clear that he is going to be able to also live up to all the expectations and fulfill his promises. So we won't hear Olaf Scholz saying we might consider doing this. What we do expect is that there will be hints that a breakthrough could have been achieved between the US and Germany in terms of organising a joint coalition of the West when it comes to sending battle tanks, because that is the thing that Olaf Scholz has been waiting for. Many people in Berlin are convinced that he has been so reluctant, because his message has always been, we're not going to go it alone. He has been so reluctant because he really wants to hear from the US. This is something that we can do. We will, as the West, deliver combat tanks. We will do that jointly. Germany won't go it alone. You won't hear any of that from the Chancellor. Now, many people are also saying, let's wait till Ramstein. Ramstein military base, of course, on Friday is the place where international defence ministers are going to be meeting, the contact group for military supply of Ukraine, where they will be coordinating these efforts. Now, that will be an opportunity also for Germany to say, OK, we agree, we will also join this coalition of countries that want to supply combat tanks. But then Olaf Scholz is somebody, if he's made such an agreement with the US, then he will want to be the one to deliver that message as well, and he will not leave that up to his defence minister.
OK, so he's due to speak, as I say, in the next few minutes. So we might hear an announcement, but not necessarily. We're not expecting to hear that today.
Yeah, if he doesn't know the details himself yet, because Joe Biden and Olaf Scholz spoke on the phone on Tuesday, and apparently the press statement afterwards said that they discussed the efficient and sustainable and closely coordinated efforts in supplying Ukraine with weapons. So that is something that people are interpreting as moving towards a breakthrough. But if they haven't agreed on the details, if they want to leave that up to the group of defence ministers meeting at Ramstein, then we won't hear more than that from Olaf Scholz today. OK, so just looking at the live feed that we have, I see that Olaf Scholz is just sitting down at Davos at the moment. He hasn't actually taken to the lectern yet. He's just being introduced. So while we wait for the introduction, perhaps we can just squeeze in the background to this, because the war in Ukraine, nearly a year old, Western arms have been flowing into Ukraine in order to help them in their fight against Russia. So people will be surprised to hear. So German weapons are already there. What is it about heavy weapons that is giving Olaf Scholz such pause? The German government says that they are, in a way, already supplying heavy weapons, because they are making the promise of delivering armoured vehicles of the Marder type. They promised that in early January and said, we are going to help Ukraine with 40 of those armoured vehicles. And they see it as a technical debate that where still it would produce different pictures, they say, if you were to deliver tanks. If Germany was to deliver proper combat tanks to Ukraine to shoot at the Russian army. This is something where many people are saying Olaf Scholz doesn't want these pictures if this is only Germany supplying those weapons.
All right. Well, Olaf Scholz is just taking to the stage now at the World Economic Forum in Davos. So let's listen in and then we'll find out what he has to say.
Professor Schwab, dear Klaus, ladies and gentlemen. What a difference a year makes. When I spoke to you last year around this time, our discussions revolved around the global economy's path out of the pandemic. At the start of 2022, many people were expecting a boom, or at least a substantial boost for our economy's transition toward climate neutrality. Then came February 24. Since then, Russia has been waging an imperialist war of aggression here on our doorstep in Europe, with dreadful consequences that Ukrainians are bearing more than anyone. Just today, the Secretary of the Interior and 15 other victims were killed in a tragic helicopter crash. We are with their families. But the war is also having an impact on all of us. For a while, energy prices jumped to levels higher than we had ever seen before. Around the world, production costs and consumer prices exploded. Many people fear that coal and oil will make a lasting comeback all across the world. If that were to happen, the 1.5-degree target would become meaningless. Our supply chains must be adapted to new geopolitical realities. Realities that you called a messy patchwork of powers in your speech yesterday, Klaus. And over all of this hangs a sword of Damocles, the danger of a new fragmentation of the world, of deglobalization and decoupling. And yet, ladies and gentlemen, this is just one part of the story of last year, just one part of the reality that we are looking at here in Davos. The other part of the story is this. Russia has already failed completely in reaching its imperialist goals. Ukraine is defending itself with great success and impressive courage. A broad international alliance led by the G7 is providing the country with financial, economic, humanitarian and military support. Germany alone made available over 12 billion euro last year, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. In Berlin at the end of October, we worked with international experts to draw up a Marshall Plan for the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. A platform of major donors is coordinating the process and, in consultation with Ukraine, ensuring that it is well implemented. Private sector capital will play a key role here. I know that many companies in Germany and beyond are very aware of the opportunities that the Ukrainian economic miracle could offer to them, particularly as the country moves toward the European Union after the end of the war. But in order for the war to end, Russia's aggression must fail. That is why we are continuously supplying Ukraine with large quantities of arms in close consultation with our partners. This includes air defense systems like IRIS-T or Patriot, artillery and armored infantry fighting vehicles, marking a profound turning point in German foreign and security policy. And there's another part to the story of last year. Within a few months, Germany made itself completely independent from Russian gas, Russian oil, and Russian coal. We concluded new partnerships in Asia, Africa, and America, thus lessening our dependence. And so I can say that our energy supply for this winter is secure. thanks to well-filled storage facilities, thanks to improved energy efficiency, thanks to remarkable solidarity within Europe, and thanks to the readiness of our companies and of millions of citizens to save energy. As a result, energy prices have recently seen a huge stop and drop. Our measures to reduce the burden on private citizens, companies and businesses are working. Inflation is falling slowly, thanks incidentally also to resolute moves by the central banks. Industrial production in Germany has remained stable over the past few months against all the odds. Our employment rate is at record levels and has recently increased even further. Most importantly, our transformation toward a climate-neutral economy, the fundamental task of our century, is currently taking on an entirely new dynamic. Not in spite of, but because of the Russian war and the resulting pressure on us Europeans to change. Whether you are a business leader or a climate activist, a security policy specialist or an investor, it is now crystal clear to each and every one of us that the future belongs solely to renewables. For cost reasons, for environmental reasons, for security reasons, and because in the long run, renewables promise the best returns. So yes, the past year brought fundamental change for Germany and Europe. But Germany itself has fundamentally changed as well. We are resolutely pushing forward with the decarbonization of our industry. We want to be climate neutral by 2045, and at the same time we will remain a country with a strong manufacturing sector. And despite all the difficulties this past year showed us, we can and we will succeed in that. In less than 7 months, we built up an entirely new import infrastructure for LNG in Wilhelmshaven. In the future, it can also be used for hydrogen. Just last Saturday, I opened our second LNG terminal within just a few weeks in Lubmin. The day after tomorrow, another terminal ship is expected to arrive at the port of Brunsbüttel. More will follow. This is not only good news for our energy security and that of our European neighbors who will be receiving gas from these terminals. Above all, it shows Germany can be flexible, we can be unbureaucratic, and we can be fast. I spoke of a new Deutschlandgeschwindigkeit, in this regard, a new German speed. We will make this German speed the benchmark, also for the transformation of the economy as a whole. Your companies can hold on us to this standard. A new law mandates that the expansion of wind power, solar energy, as well as electricity and hydrogen networks now take priority. We will make available no less than 2% of our country for wind power with a minimum of red tape. We have streamlined our processes so that approvals for electricity grids, to name just one example, are granted on average 2 years faster than before. And we intend to step up the pace even more. You can also rely on our targets. The obstacles have been swept aside. For 2023, we have more than doubled the volume of calls for tender for onshore wind farms alone. By the year 2030, 80% of our electricity production will come from renewable sources, again, double what it is at present. At the same time, our electricity requirements are increasing from 600 terawatt hours today to 750 by the end of the decade. And we are expecting them to double yet again in the 2030s. This is a massive increase. That is why the Federal Network Agency has been given a clear mandate to prepare and expand our electricity grids accordingly. We will regularly review the progress made. If it's not on schedule, the measures will be adjusted. However, electricity alone is not enough to run Germany's industry. I'm thinking, for instance, of steel production. Hydrogen will play a decisive role there. And that is not a far-off scenario. Last fall, ThyssenKrupp gave the green light to build a direct reduction plant for low-carbon premium steel. With a capacity of 2.5 million metric tons, the plant will save 3.5 million metric tons of CO2 per year. This is just one example of Europe's strength in innovation. Europe is the world's #1 in hydrogen patents, and 1 in 10 global applications comes from Germany. The first supply chains for green hydrogen are currently being built up in our country. For our own production, we are using offshore wind in the North Sea. In parallel, we are concluding hydrogen partnerships worldwide. For as long as quantities are small and the costs of production correspondingly high, the state will bring prices down to a level lucrative for the industry. Our goal is nothing less than an electrolysis boom. And as quantities increase, a hydrogen-powered industrial sector will emerge that preserves the climate and is independent of volatile prices for fossil fuels. Because one thing is absolutely certain: energy must remain affordable in Germany, in Europe, and worldwide. In Germany, we decided to cap electricity and gas prices for private citizens and companies. These measures will run until 2024. Annually, we will use around 2.2% of our GDP for this, a total of up to 200 billion euro. That is both forceful and proportionate. It will give your companies the reliable energy prices and the planning certainty you need to invest in Germany's transformation. In the European Union, we have agreed on joint targets for gas filling and saving. We will purchase gas jointly more often and coordinate storage better. And we will use our market power to ensure that European prices do not decouple completely from the world market. Moreover, we are also aware of our global responsibility. Let me say this expressly to our friends and partners in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The fact that we Europeans purchase LNG on the world market must not lead to scarcity elsewhere. We will need alternatives for the roughly 120 billion cubic meters of gas from Russian pipelines missing from the world market. More renewables, of course, but also temporarily additional gas resources. Otherwise, there is a danger that without affordable gas, emerging economies in particular might switch back to coal. This would be even more harmful to the environment. Of course, we must avoid new lock-ins, new path dependencies at all costs by making new projects HO2 ready from the very outset and by expanding renewables in parallel. In the short term, this may lead to higher costs. However, in the long term, we all stand to save if the impact of climate change is less dramatic. In Germany, too, switching to a climate-friendly economy will take efforts. We are talking about investments around 400 billion euro for the expansion of renewables between now and 2030. Investments, by the way, which are already well underway. The most recent example is a contract worth billions for Siemens Energy to connect a new offshore wind park to the grid. And this is just one example illustrating why this turning point towards a climate-friendly industry is not the end of our industrial powerhouse, but a new start. After all, even before the energy crisis that Russia triggered, Germany's business model was not only based on the energy-intensive mass production of aluminium, cement or crude steel, but on highly specialized research and technology-intensive industrial products, products that are needed all around the world. All the more so, actually, when the world is now transitioning towards a climate-neutral future. Even before Russia's war of aggression, Germany's energy prices were not the lowest. And yet Germany was and remains competitive. This is because of thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises all across the country. Enterprises that are highly innovative and adaptable, which explains why they are so often global leaders. This is thanks to high public and private investment in research and development, which, for example, ensured that the first COVID-19 test and the first safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine were developed in Germany. Just in December, a team at the Helmholtz Center in Berlin set a new world record for the efficiency of solar cells. And now, just a few weeks later, our companies are already setting up pilot lines for the use of these tandem cells. That, ladies and gentlemen, is and remains the German business model, particularly now as we chart our path to a climate-neutral future. Where else is there such broad consensus between businesses, employees and politics that the path to climate neutrality is not just ecologically necessary, but also offers new opportunities in global competition? When it comes to basic and professional training for employees, for example, politics, business and trade unions in Germany are working hand in hand. And before the year is out, our country will finally benefit from modern immigration legislation. After all, if we want to remain competitive as a leading industrial nation, we need experienced practitioners, qualified engineers, tradesmen and mechanics. Those who want to roll up their sleeves are welcome in Germany. That is our message. For decades now, the forecasts have been predicting a shrinking German population. But it is up to us to decide whether this happens. So far, it certainly hasn't. Today, Germany has more inhabitants and employed persons than ever before. And this is precisely the trend we are going to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, a climate-neutral future is, needless to say, not something any single country can achieve on its own. That is why our dialogue and a forum like Davos are so crucial. What we are doing in Germany also serves the goal of making Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. At the European level, we are going to lower our net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990. This decision stands. Here, we are relying on the market, on competition and on innovation. The EU's emission trading system is a case in point. Even today, we are using it to cut permissible emission levels in a way that is predictable for all. At the same time, this system is serving as a catalyst for innovation. But to ensure the most ambitious are not disadvantaged, we prepare around the carbon border adjustment mechanism in Europe. At the same time, however, Europe remains open for international trade. I'm doing my utmost to ensure that the free trade agreements we have successfully negotiated with Canada, Korea, Japan, New Zealand and Chile will soon be followed by new ones with Mercosur, India and Indonesia. And we are also open to discuss a tariff agreement for the industrial sector with the United States. Though these agreements, we are creating a level playing field and we are preventing high-emission industries from heading off to countries with less ambitious climate targets. This is also the aim of the International Climate Club we launched during Germany's G7 presidency. A secretariat has recently been set up at the OECD and the International Energy Agency. So the club is now open to new, ambitious members. In the United States, this ambition has a name: the Inflation Reduction Act. Some $370 billion have been earmarked for energy and climate change mitigation over the next 10 years. I very much welcome this investment. Through the German Climate and Transformation Fund, we have made almost 180 billion euro available ourselves for the period of 2023 to 2026. But local content requirements for certain products must not result in discrimination against European businesses. Protectionism hinders competition and innovation and is detrimental to climate change mitigation. We, as EU members, are talking to our American friends about this. And at the same time, we are looking at what we ourselves can do to further improve investment conditions here in Europe. The CHIPS Act, for instance, has brought about a new start for chip manufacturing in Europe. Investors are starting new production plants for billions of euros. They can build on an existing semiconductor industry. This could become a model for other key technologies, particularly in the digital and climate sectors. And the funding is there for the taking. To date, only 20% of the more than 700 billion euro in the European Recovery Fund has been paid out. Its full impact will thus emerge over the coming years. To remain competitive, we will have to make European legislation on state aid more agile and flexible, just as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has proposed and reaffirmed here yesterday. So that investors know in advance what support to expect and don't have to wait until years after their investment to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, the past year challenged us as seldom before. Yet, at the same time, we changed and moved things forward as seldom before. Germany itself is changing. If I may make a prediction, my successor will address you at the World Economic Forum in 2045. Sure. He or she will present Germany as one of the world's first climate-neutral industrial nations. Energy supplies in Germany and Europe will then be sourced almost exclusively from green electricity, heat and hydrogen. We will be moving emission-free on our roads and railroads. Our buildings will be energy efficient. Our businesses will be producing on a climate-neutral basis. And what is more, they are the ones who will have driven this transition who will continue to drive it. So if you ask me today where you can invest in the future sustainably with a high return, my answer is, don't look any further. Come to us, to Germany and to Europe. Thank you very much.
That was the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz addressing the World Economic Forum.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. We have some questions.
So great. So Nina Haase, our chief political correspondent, was here listening to me. Nina, let me just tell you how that took me by surprise, because I'm used to hearing Chancellor Scholz making quite dry political speeches. And it started off very much like that. Thank you very much. This is what's going on in Ukraine. But then he seemed to sort of, having dealt with Ukraine and said that Russia hasn't got what it wanted and the West is coming together, he sort of seemed to do a hard turn and went into sell mode to the gathered business CEOs and sold Germany as a country that is going towards climate neutrality. Our laws are going to be very flexible. He made a big thing as well about the country's training opportunities and pushed immigration, which is as a good thing, which is something that few in his position would have done.
It's always interesting to listen to Olaf Scholz's speeches and to listen to those details because they do come as a surprise. I've got here in my notes, I wrote down exactly what you just said. He came across as a salesman, pitching Germany as a reliable partner. And that doesn't come as a big surprise. I mean, look at the massive transformation that Germany is undergoing at the moment. The invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February was such a massive shock for this country, politically, economically. Everything, they had got it wrong when it came to economic policy. For decades, they made themselves dependent on Russian energy deliveries to such an extent that everybody here was completely shaken and didn't know whether our companies were going to survive if Russia indeed took this leverage.
And switched off the taps.
And switched off the taps, exactly. And they did that in the summer. So, of course, Olaf Scholz and his government, who were only not even 3 months into their jobs when this happened, when the Russian invasion happened, they had to act immediately. So, to me, it makes a lot of sense what Olaf Scholz said, because Germany did lose a lot of credibility. Our Eastern partners in Poland, etc., they'd been warning for decades that Germany was too reliant, too dependent on Russia, and they were proven right. And so in terms of security policy, Germany has had to do almost a 180-degree shift, moving away from Russia as one of the partners that you can rely on. When it comes to energy, when it comes to the economy, all those sectors were affected. And of course, Olaf Scholz knows that the world is moving into a direction where people in the upcoming countries, all those G20 nations, they're going to grow in size, in population. They're going to become a lot more important in the next couple of years. And they will want to know where they can invest their newfound wealth and property and prosperity, sorry. And this is something where he knows Europe has to get a move on and has to sell itself as a reliable partner for them. This is a very clear message.
It was interesting, just on that point, that he devoted part of his speech to saying that Germany and Europe are aware of their global responsibilities. So Asia, Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, we won't be hogging all the gas reserves, but there is plenty of business to be done with Germany for you. We won't forget you.
Exactly, because he is convinced, that is something that he's been telling everybody for months now, that the future global situation will be one where you don't necessarily choose whether you're in the camp of the United States, Russia or China, but it will become a world where everybody is sort of out there trying to make bilateral deals as well, which is why Olaf Scholz was so happy that he got support at the G20 meeting in Bali last year for this condemnation of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, because he said it is vital that they understand that this cannot be tolerated. And he sees that these countries, the emerging economies, are going to play a much more crucial role also politically.
But he also outlined the balancing act, the fact that globalization has sort of put us in this position. So international trade links have to be shortened, but globalization is not a bad thing. We just have to sort of reassess it. And he talked about this US Inflation Reduction Act, which is such a clash between the US and Europe at the moment. Surprised everyone by saying, I welcome the US investment, but there must be no discrimination against other countries.
I don't think he surprised everyone, to be honest, because it means that I found that one of the most important parts of his speech, actually, when he said that he supports the suggestion by Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, European Commission President, who in Davos said, OK, we may need to become a little more flexible here in Europe as well when it comes to governments wanting to support their own companies when they want to undergo transformation, they want to push certain technologies, for example. So far, the EU has pretty rigid rules. You're not allowed to interfere too much. But of course now the Europeans are also waking up and seeing with the Inflation Reduction Act that they're going to lose competitiveness. They are going to lose out if they don't react. And so this was one of the crucial messages here from Scholz, that he supports that. But of course, ultimately, Germany would benefit. The German government could then subsidise its own companies.
Right. And no mention, though, in this speech of tanks.
No, but of armoured vehicles. And this is also something that, to me, didn't really come as a big surprise. I said to you in the talk that we had before he took to the stage that if he doesn't have a deal that is hammered out in all its detail, he's not going to mention anything. Why would he share things that that he will later have to take back? That is not how he works. So we do think that there could be some sort of movement. There is probably a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and probably Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, is right when he says, let's wait till Friday when international defence ministers get together here in Germany at Ramstein to coordinate military support for Ukraine. We are hearing positive signals that Germany is willing to give its consent so that Leopard 2 combat tanks can be sent to Ukraine. But today was not the moment for Olaf Scholz. He repeated again that Germany has already made a step up, qualitatively speaking, in terms of weapons supplies when they announced that they were going to send those armoured vehicles of the Marder type.
Right, thank you for that. Nina Haase is our chief political correspondent, guiding us through that speech we heard from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz at the World Economic Forum. For that, we thank you, Nina. So, as I say, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has delivered his address to the World Economic Forum in Davos. He said that Russian aggression must fail in order for the war in Ukraine to end, but he did not say that Germany would send modern tanks to aid Ukraine. He went on to stress that